don't even know what that means.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
No, it's not. It's
Gets
gross.
the people going.
What's good, comrades? I'm Dr. X, real name, no gimmicks, and I'm the host of the Provocative Podcast, a fusion of bold and provocative conversations among Black and other veterans of color. Greetings, comrades. Our guest on this episode of the Provocative Podcast is a 30-year Air Force veteran who empowers women stepping into the C-suite executive positions with memorable personal brand strategies to fully show up and thrive as a confident and influential leader. Comrades, please welcome Rochelle Slay Queen Hemingway.
Hello, how are you?
Hey, how's it going?
I'm well.
Good. Hey, truly appreciate you being a part of this podcast. It's been a minute in the making. You invited me to your podcast a few months ago, and on the back of my mind was, hey, I got to get Slay Queen on my podcast when I get it up and going. So I was like, and you inspired me to actually start this podcast. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Okay, well, I love it. I'm like, a lot of us are using our platforms for different things, and this is definitely a conversation that we need to have. And so thank you for being on my show, and I'm reciprocating it back over to you.
Yeah, and it's fantastic because we meet at least once a month at First Friday Black Vet Working. So this is just a continuation of conversations that we have, organic conversations here in the Maryland area. So you know what? Let's get right into it.
Let's do it.
So,
Let's do it.
I mean, you know what? The whole name, the provocative, it throws people off because they're like, okay, did he misspell something? I mean, what is this all about? Did he mean provocative? So it's a fusion between bold and provocative. So that's where this is coming from. That's the energy that I'm bringing to this podcast. And then on top of that, the BOVOC in provocative actually stands for Black and Other Veterans of Color. So it's one of those things, as you know, in the Air Force, if it's not an acronym, you're not going to remember it. It doesn't really exist. And I'm sure you're going to talk about the acronyms that you use in your practice as well. But when I say bold and provocative, I guess let me start off with this question. What's the boldest decision that you've ever made in your life, and how did it work out?
Well, it was joining the Air Force. And I say that because I was 19 years old. Well, I think I was still 18. I turned 19 in basic training. It was one of the boldest acts that I had done up until that point. In fact, I didn't even tell my parents. It was more of a conversation that I had with my girlfriend, who was at the time one of those friends that you don't want to have your kids hanging around with. Like, she would be getting in a lot of troubles, and my parents are like, you should be hanging out with her. And we worked together at this restaurant called Mr. Steak. And she says, hey, let's just do this buddy program. And I was like, what's this buddy program about? What are you talking about? She says, you can join the military. We can get out of this boring city called Kokomo, Indiana. That's where I'm originally from, and see the world. And I was like, okay, very naive. All right. But I went to the recruiter's office. She went into the Army recruiter's office and she got enlisted there. I went into the Air Force recruiter's office because my dad used to be a recruiter with the person that actually put me in the military. And I signed the papers, took them home, put them on the dining room table, and I went upstairs. And then all of a sudden I hear, Rochelle, what's going on down here? Get down here. And I told them I'm going into the military. And I didn't have their permission. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but it was the absolute best thing that has happened in my life. Not only did it change the trajectory for where I am today, but I learned so many things. I learned so many things and I traveled all over the world. And sometimes I had to pinch myself because I was in the military for 30 years. And now, I'm doing what I've been called to do. And I'm like, wow, all those different experiences has led me to this point today. So that was the biggest, boldest act when I was in my teens, for sure.
Yeah, that had to be bold at that time in your life to just go off and join the military. It's something that not a lot of people do, especially in this day and age. It's this fear of, just committing yourself to the military and what has happened over the past couple of decades about, wars and things of that nature. And with you having 30 years in the Air Force, and you just kind of reminisced about when you were a teenager, when you were younger, I guess, what conversation would you have with your younger self?
Well, one of the first conversations I would have is failure is feedback. I
Hmm.
was a late bloomer in the military. The first 10 years, I was just partying. I mean, I'm just going to be frank and honest. I went in there, I was away from home, first time ever. So I thought, hey, I'm just going to hang out with my friends. We lived in the dorms. It was like college, if you will, but you had a uniform on. And so I went in thinking, hey, this is just, I'm going to just hang out. And then when I started to notice my peers were getting promoted to the next ranks, and I was testing as well, but I wasn't doing as great as I expected. I knew my job, but I really wasn't taking the Air Force seriously. It wasn't a career for me. It was, I'm in here. And I had maybe a 6 year span where I didn't make rank two different times. And each one of those times I felt so defeated. But then I had to learn from that. That's feedback. Like I had to learn from it. What is it that I need to learn more of? Am I a good test taker? Do I need to study more? And I had to adjust everything because I really wanted to succeed in the military since I had been in for like the 10 years. And I just needed to keep moving forward. And then the other thing was to trust my instincts. Every time I didn't trust my instinct, it went in a different direction than what I anticipated. And I always said, I should have done what I thought of firsthand every single time, right? Then I just started to trust that my gut was speaking to me because it's our second brain. And it was giving me indication to move in a different direction. So those are the two things I would tell my younger self. And now, as I'm older,
Hmm.
I definitely use those two pieces of advice all the time.
Wow. I did not know that at one point in your career that it sounds like you were what, passed over or just did not make the next rank, and you still like persevered to make
Yes.
a 30-year career.
Oh, yes. There was 2 times in my
That
career that I felt very stagnated
wow.
and I was not moving, and I almost gave up. I did. I almost gave up because
Mm,
to me at the time it was hard to see everyone else get promoted and their careers were taking off. So when I was a staff sergeant, I had on staff senior airman the before staff. I had that on for years. Staff sergeant I had on for years. I had on master sergeant for years. It was only to the last few ranks where I started to catch on. And that's all indication that
mhm,
late
mhm,
bloomers can also thrive and succeed. Sometimes we think things have to be very instantaneous, but I needed to be cooked and marinated a little bit more, all right, and seasoned just a little bit more so that when I was able to uh, be responsible enough to be in the highest enlisted rank, that I was actually doing it with intention and with the knowledge and with the experience behind it.
mhm. You remind me of myself in terms of being a late bloomer and what we say in the country. I needed a little bit more cook to it, a little bit
That's
more
right.
cook to my trajectory. And because I almost flunked out of the Air Force Academy, I ended up graduating with a 2.4 GPA. And then I went on to get my master's and finished that with a 3.5, and then on to my doctorate with a 4.0. But it goes to
Hmm.
show you that, yeah, I could have just given up at the academy and just said, you know what, I can't do this. But it seemed like at some point I just cracked the code,
Yes.
and that made all the difference. So, with that, I mean, what would you consider your proudest achievement, and what did it take to accomplish it?
Well, I have two. All right. And I know that sometimes people just narrow it down to one, but I think it's very important for people to understand that I'm just as a human being like everybody else is. Um, my biggest accomplishment is having our son. Um, that's the first because they told us that we cannot have children. Me and my husband served at the same time, both retired as chief master sergeant. So we were very high performing leaders in the Air Force. And, I was being successful in, a lot of different areas, but I didn't know why we couldn't have children. Like that should have had happened. We had been married for 8 years and nothing. And we weren't not having trying to have, we were trying to have a child. And we had an in vitro fertilization procedure done. It did not work. So we just went about our careers and said, hey, let's just invest more time and energy into it. It will happen. If it happens, maybe we should look at different options. But it actually happened without us having a procedure and conceived naturally. And we have our son now who's 14 years old. But for us as a family, it was important for us to have a child. And so for us, that is the biggest accomplishment that we've done together. Now, outside of that, it is making Chief Master Sergeant in the United States Air Force. And I made Chief at year 25. A lot of other, again, my peers had made chief prior to that, a few years before me. And I didn't see myself as a chief. I thought that maybe senior master sergeant, when I made senior master sergeant, I was like, this is awesome. Like, this is, if I retire right now, I'm good. Right. But then, there were other you know, um, plans for me. And so I made chief and I just looked back on my career from that point and I looked at different steps or milestones that I achieved up until that point, and it just started to add up and make sense. Like, yes, you did this, you did that, um, you were awarded this, and it kind of added all up. And again, no one in my family has achieved that rank. My dad, he retired as a master sergeant. So being able to accomplish that as a Black woman who I had a
Mm.
lot of challenges and adversities and obstacles. I was even challenged when I was a chief in lots of times. But I understood, that I had a responsibility, if you will, because I
Mhm.
had grew into those ranks and I knew going forward that I could just go back to some of those experiences and apply. And I'm still learning, I was still learning as a chief, and it was the the most significant accomplishment in my career. So having AJ and making chief.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. I guess I would say the perseverance it took for
Yes.
both of those accomplishments. It can make someone just throw up their hands and say, you know what, woe is me, my life sucks. Why is this happening to me? And you persevered in both circumstances. So that's fantastic. So with that, I mean, it seems like there are several different opportunities where you may have felt like completely alive and in tune with your purpose and your calling. What circumstance would you say you felt like you're most alive in your life?
Well, it was when, unfortunately, one of my airmen lost his battle with depression. And I went on to a deployment 3 days after he passed away. When I got to the deployment, it was the first deployment that I went to since I had AJ. And so there was a lot of mixed
Mm.
emotions that I was having on this deployment. And I had a lot of time to sit and think. Had a lot of time to really think about what is it that is going to move me into a better headspace. So I started to think about my relationship with the airman. We were very close because our personalities, they were very much alike. He understood me, I understood him, and one of his favorite words was slay, SLAY. So hence the slay queen. Um, and I thought about that word and I really looked up what is the meaning of the word, because he used to say it, but I really wasn't paying too much attention to it at the time. And when I looked it up, it means to kill it, to dominate it, and to nail it, to be on point, to impress greatly, and to dream big and work hard until you own it. And I just sat with that word for a long time. And I was like, you know what? I think this has been the mantra of my career. Um, I had to prepare. I was leading different teams in different scenarios with, a lot of challenging um, uh, opportunities. I'll call them opportunities for growth. And, I had to build these family units, these teams of people, and I had to have the right mindset. So I turned it into an acronym because when I came back from the deployment, I didn't just want to say slay. I was a chief and I wanted to create this vision. So S means to stay ready, to be ready. L means to lead out loud. A is a sense of family, a sense of community. And Y is you are built to last. So after I created the
Mm.
acronym and
Wow.
then using the word, like my purpose and my calling, it just fell in line. It's the personality of it. It's the way that I live and walk my life. It's a personal brand that sets me apart from a lot of different people. I mean, and I'm known for that. Like that's what people come to me about if they are needing support. They want to know how to slay it. Right. And I have different modules, if you will, and different channels to ensure that anyone who comes to me that I can help them in that avenue. So I'm definitely living in my purpose and my calling right now.
Right now. That's what's up.
Right now.
And
Right
many
now.
of us, when we are in our post-military careers, we do not, we simply don't get to the point where you are. and we're trying to figure out exactly, what to do in our lives, and do we want to go into this contracting world or corporate America? Sometimes we feel like perhaps we should have stayed in a bit longer in the military, or we should have gotten out earlier. So let me ask you this: what was the most significant change that you made in your life, and what prompted you to make that change?
I think all of this and what I have shared with you was all about mindset and, how do I view what I'm doing? Stemmed from me losing weight. So I'm very complex, all right, like most of us are. Before I joined the military, like a year before I joined, I weighed 200 pounds. And over that summer, I worked at the restaurant with my girlfriend, and I had lost like 40 pounds just by movement and just being active. And my parents thought I was sick, but I wasn't. I was moving and I was eating less. And I went into the military at my maximum allowable weight. And I struggled for the first 10 years of my career. Again, the first 10 years of my military career was like all over the place. And when I found that in order for me to be at my best is moving my body and really taking care of myself, it completely transformed everything for me. I still work out every single day. I'm that crazy person, right? Who runs, who lifts, who spins. I do burpees. I do all types of modules, if you will, in the fitness space. Something happens when I get into this active movement. It transfers to all areas of my life. And I've maintained my weight loss all these years. It's been over 30 years because I decided, I made the commitment to invest lots of time in my health and fitness and in my wellness journey. And that I believe is just truly the foundation, and it's in alignment with my personal brand, Slay Queen. So I I know that sometimes people go, "Oh my gosh, it's work," but for me, it's not work. For me, it's my time. It's my time to connect with my mind, my body, and my spirit, my soul. They all get connected when I'm doing something for me and I see the results of doing something for me, not just from the physical aspect, but from mental, social, spiritual, intellectual, occupational. I can go in the 8 dimensions of wellness, but I really see it. And I'm appreciative that I have a journey, I have a story to share with others who may be struggling with their weight journey.
Wow, that is outstanding. How you went from that stage in your life, and really, as you mentioned before, it seems like you just cracked the code in different aspects of life, and you learn how to just and get through some things. So I guess, have you, it sounds like you are on this journey, this fitness journey,
Yes.
and it's just a way of life. It's your lifestyle. uh,
Mhm.
have you ever pursued a passion, or perhaps a hobby that first seemed impractical, but ultimately brought you immense joy or a sense of fulfillment?
Yeah, I have dabbled in a lot of different things. I think we all um try something here and try something there and don't know where it's going to go. I have a lot of different passions for sure. Health and fitness is my first passion. But I'm also a crafter, and I know a lot of people don't see that in me. But I have a Cricut machine where I can design a lot of things. So in my time, I make personalized gifts for friends, family. And of course, it has slave mantra and stuff like that. But I really like working with my hands. Um, it- I can't really explain it because I like calligraphy. My aunt taught me how to write with a calligraphy pen. And anytime I get to work with my hands and do something, there again, it's a passion of mine. It's a little bit of a hobby. It can become expensive, of course, but I I see it as my kind of outlet. You know, it's one of my outlets that I incorporate when I'm able to. When COVID hit, I was on my Cricut machine. My husband actually bought me this machine. And when I could go to Hobby Lobby, I would get the materials and I would, do all the things because, the stores were closed and you couldn't go in there without a mask, all this stuff. But I have it here in my office because when I do have some time to make something, that's what I do. So that's one of the minis, but that is something that I do more often that people don't know.
People don't know. People don't know. People think that you're out there, slaying to success, writing books and doing this and the third, but they don't know what else. It's okay to have multiple passions, right?
Oh
People
yeah,
sometimes try to
yeah,
put you in a corner, put you in a silo, and say, "No, I thought that you doing this. You doing this as well." And sometimes
yes,
they either on purpose or inadvertently try to make you feel like you're doing too much. So
yes.
I'm happy to hear that you have multiple passions, and it's important to have that. So let me ask you this in terms of your impact on others. What's the most
Mm.
significant impact that you've made on someone else's life, and how did it shape your sense of purpose?
So when this question was on the list, I really thought back all the different people that were on my teams, and the person that kept showing up in my mind was his name is Josh Spivey, actually Dr. Josh Spivey. Um, when I was stationed at Yokota, I was assigned to a family health unit with about 40 technicians. At the time, he was in jail. He was in the confinement center on base. He was sentenced to 9 months. And I, get all the information about
Mm.
all the people, and they said, "Hey, you've got one person in the confinement center." And I said, "Oh my goodness, well, what did they do?" All right. So they explained to me, how he, had to complete this sentence and that I was responsible for him for the 9 months. He had just been sentenced. So every week I was going to see him, and whenever he wanted, more time with me or just to, have company because it gets lonely, he would call me on the because we didn't have cell phones back then, that we used. So he would call me on the work phone through the dispatcher that was at the confinement center, and we created this amazing relationship. Um, and then when he was released, he would come to my house, to our house, and because it was a financial thing, he would take all his money from the finance center and then bring it to me. I would keep his money.
Hmm.
And then whenever he wanted money, I would give him like $20, $30 because that's what landed him in confinement. So
Okay.
we did this until he was separated. And probably about 5 years later, he reached out to me and he says, "Hey, um, I'm getting ready to graduate with my doctorate's degree." And I said, "What?"
Wow.
And he began to share with me all of the things that he was appreciative for what I did for him. I saw him. That's what he said. I
Mhm.
I saw him. I did not treat him
Mhm.
like, he was a bad airman. And, sometimes that is labeled on people. I treated him as if he was my own. And, this was again a lesson for him to learn from. He came to my house because he was here and stationed in DMV when we moved in, like maybe 2 weeks after we moved in, drove to my house. We had this great, reunion, sharing stories and so forth. He is a professor and he teaches now in New Mexico. But just from that short period of time, I realized the impact that I was having on other individuals. And I wanted to repeat that on, like over and over and over again. And then so I started to move like that way. Every person that I meet
Mhm.
is going to be part of my family. I'm going to treat them in such a way. Now, if you know how the military is, if people are not used to that, they'll let you know. But he was really like this case study, and he still is. Like, he had nothing, had nothing
Mm.
when he left the military. And he took all of what he knew and said, I'm going to make something of myself. I even had him speaking to some airmen when I was a chief at Ellsworth Air Force Base who were undergoing administrative actions, and he was able to
Mhm.
share his story with them so that way they can see themselves, in a much different space than where they were at. So yeah, he is the person.
Wow. For you to influence someone that was in confinement, I mean, that's typically the end for some people. These are the people that end up having some real issues when they get out of the military. And for him to go from confinement and down and out to becoming a doctor and then finding you and saying, hey, you were one of the main reasons for my trajectory after the military. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Simply
It's
amazing.
it's again,
So
it's
I'm going to
awesome.
get you out of here on this question.
Okay.
So as you know, you have your mantra, you have your acronym. I have my mantra, which is inspire, empower, and uplift your damn self. So let me ask you, what do you do to uplift your damn self?
Okay. I have a lot. I think it's important to have a lot of options. So I made sure, that if one doesn't work, then the next one's going. Let me see if that works, and then on and on. One of the things is I count my blessings every single day. Every single day that I wake up, open my eyes, put my feet on the ground, I say thank you because, as we all know, military life is one of those things where you could be in a scenario where you don't know if you're going to come out of there alive. And so I'm always grateful and thankful that I got a roof over my head, that I've got, resources, that I got people who love me, a good support system. So I make a list. That's one of the things that I do. I move my body, of course, every day because, when you get your endorphins up, then, everything around you kind of looks differently and you're not as stressed and frustrated and angry at the past. Because sometimes I do think about the situations that I was in and I could really, go from 0 to 100. So it balances me out. um, I also do positive affirmations. I am, and put plug into the word because sometimes we think we're not worthy enough, especially after retiring from a long career. So I use positive affirmations. I take evening walks almost every night, and it's not for physical, it's for mental. I'm connected to nature and I like to hear the sound of birds and kids playing and getting breathing fresh air in. It gets me connected to the world. I have self-care rituals. I think that's important that you have habits and routines that are good for you. So that way you're always taking care of yourself and putting yourself into the center, because so much is asked of us all the time and we can't pour from an empty cup. So I definitely do a lot of things on repeat, on purpose. And I surround myself with positivity. That's one of the things that I can control. I couldn't necessarily control all the time when I was in the military, but now I can control that. And if I don't particularly like someone's energy, I don't have to stay in it. All right. And I get to choose. And so I surround myself with
Right.
positivity. And then lastly, I give back. I give back a lot. I use my voice, I use my platforms. I connect with people who there's an opportunity for me to share my story. I think that's important. And it's not a monetarily thing. It's more of this is an act of kindness, goodwill. I am in the community as a resource. So those are a lot of the different things that I tap into to help me on a daily basis.
Fantastic. Thanks again for being a part of this. Your responses, your energy, the way that you have gone from, like you said, 0 to 100 in terms of where you were as a kid growing up, and the decision you made to go into the military, the challenges that you had in the military, but you still persevered, did 30 years, and now you just continue just going out there and slaying to success. So I truly appreciate you being a part of this podcast. And do you have any final words? And I want you to give everyone where they can find you.
Okay, well, thank you. Yes, of course. So life is a journey, right? It's not particularly a destination. And I think sometimes people see other people doing well and they're thriving and they're being successful, and that could really mess with someone, right? You're wanting to do those types of things. And I always specify, especially to my clients, meet yourself where you're at. Meet yourself where you're at. Give yourself grace, because sometimes these things that you want to do, it takes time to understand you. And this is my rediscovery phase as well as my healing journey. I think that it's important. And we're always probably going to be on our healing journey, but more so from the military, there are a little bit more unique nuances for us. And so I would say give yourself some grace. And you can find me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I'm there every day. All right. So Rochelle Hemingway. You can also find me on Facebook. Uh, and you can find me on YouTube at Rochelle Hemingway. I do have 2 talk shows. I have Slay to Success talk show and a Rise and Slay morning show. And those are throughout the week. I am an author of the book Slay to Success, so you can go to Amazon and you could find that resource, which shares about my journey in the military and what slay means. And you can find me on IG at the Slay Boss Lady. And I am all of the places, the main areas, if you will. And if you just DM me and want to connect, I'll be more than happy to do what I can to support you.
Excellent. Thanks again for being a part of the Provocative Podcast. I truly appreciate you, Slay Queen.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye-bye.
X gon' give it to you. He gon' give it to you. X gon' give it to you. He gon' give it to you.